Okay, good morning. I'm happy to be here. And Rick, thank you very much for bringing me. First of all, as I was walking downtown in Ann Arbor, I saw, in fact, I was working with Tom and his wife, my host, and we saw an inscription that says that recent studies show that a picture is worth between 920 to 925 words. So then this hit me, and then reflecting upon my own experience in Ghana. In Ghana, we usually say that, of course, recent studies show that a taste of anything is worth 5 to 10 pages of words. So this is chocolate from Ghana. I'm not going to give you the history of Ghana. I'm not going to give you the economy of Ghana. So I'll give you some taste of Ghana chocolate. And then it will be speaking between 5 to 10 pages of words. Today, the talk is about informal recycling in Ghana, the big issues. And because of the mixture of the audience, so I'm going to give a global perspective, which I know other speakers would speak. We would have said it a lot. And then I will look at our own studies in Agbobloshie, and then, the kind of interventions that we have there. Now, I'd like to introduce two colleagues from Ghana, Dr. Julius Stevens, Dr. Emmanuel Asampong, and also because we have some big project going on in Agbobloshie area that is supposed to actually, build capacity in environmental and occupational health. This project is supported by U.S. National Institute for Fogati International and the Canada's International Development Research Center, IDRC. So on that note, I also want to introduce some scholars who are also part of this big project, who are here for 4 months intensive, research training and taking courses in to help them develop they are doctoral students. So they are, Fatou has raised a hand first from Senegal, Ahoy from Cote d'Ivoire, Augustine Ghana, Efua Ghana, Laurentia Ghana, Comfort Ghana. So I'm standing here to speak on behalf of my research colleagues, senior mentors, Dr. Professor Stuart Bathman, Professor Thomas Robbins. Oh, he's left? Okay. So then I'll go straight to the talk. This first slide just shows you the global inflows of electrical materials and then outflow of waste from Europe, the European Union area. And what that tells you is that we have most of the e-waste we have in our country, although we generate a few in terms of like in-country generation. So statistics generally is poor for e-waste. And as you can see in Chile, you were not able to tell whether how much you generate in-country or what. So in Ghana, we've been doing this for quite some time now, so we have some statistics in terms of like internal generation of e-waste, and then what we actually get as importation or illegal importation into the country. So this first slide actually shows, global movement of electrical equipment into European Union, and then the e-waste, like what is produced as waste, that goes outside the European Union area. This slide, so I'll run through this quickly. This shows the global generation of e-waste. In the United States, you have about 10 million metric tons of e-waste generated. In Mexico, you have 1.1 something. In Brazil, approximately 1.5. In EU, you have close to 11 million. In Russia, 1.5. You have in China, 7.9, approximately 10. In India, 10 million, and then in Japan, 3 million in Japan, also 3 million. So in Africa, generally, you see that is blank, which means that we lack statistics for internal generation. So because of that, I try to fill this gap based on our local estimation of this thing. So you can see that this compares Nigeria, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Benin with country situation in China and in India. And you can see that China leads top the list, and then, of course, followed by Nigeria, even more than India, Ghana, the fourth one, and then Cote d'Ivoire and Benin, as we can see. This is this global movement on e-waste. You have e-waste moving from the United States, North America to China, and you have the bulk of what we have in West Africa comes from the Western Europe area. As you can see, Rick showed this slide earlier, and this is suspected destination of e-waste from North America and other industrial nations into the various parts of the globe. In terms of, generally, e-waste is considered as illegal trade, also because we have international conventions, and I reserve one of the slides to talk about global conventions and the impact on the e-waste trade and others. But this is the situation. You have North America, you have Western Europe, India and Asia, Southeast Asia, and then you have Africa region. You have Ghana there and Nigeria. So you have heard the two speakers talk about Agbobloshie. So I'm going to give you Agbobloshie, and then Agbobloshie, this is the location in terms of in relation to Africa itself. So you have the map of West and Central Africa, and then Ghana map, and Ghana is blown up, and then you see Accra, and then to the left, or to my right, and to your left, I think you'll see Agbobloshie. That's our Google map showing Agbobloshie area where the recycling takes place. So Agbobloshie itself is located within the capital city of Ghana, and it's one of the largest, best studied e-waste sites in the world. It is situated near the central business district and in the arm of two rivers, Koli Lagoon and then Odo rivers in Accra. So it's still the same slide here, showing the Google map. And then, so I give you the general economy of Agbobloshie. When you get there's usually large food market, you have banking services, manufacturing, retrieve scrap metals, use electronic car batteries, school education, etc. Of course, residential, also we have residential areas around the area, but we have e-waste workers living within the site itself. And then you also have brewery. We have a major brewery called Accra Brewery there. So typically the recycling method, we have the open burning, the manual dismantling using chisels and hammers, and then you have fabrication and molding into local cook stoves. So a lot of activities goes there. It's really a big visual confusion when you get to the site. So this is a typical dismantling activity, and you can see central CPU of a machine, the central processing unit of a machine, and the guy using a chisel and chiseling out something. So overall, there's a lot of environmental and human health concerns. So the activities in this area usually results in huge and tremendous environmental exposures. And you can see, and of course this car in the picture is carrying this time, I think, sachet water. I think I saw this car in Rick in your destination. It was carrying, it was a load of e-waste entering Agbobloshie. So this is how the economy is organized in the area. Those of us who've been working there, it's no longer a confusion for us. So when we tend to see very, very organized rhythm or teams of activities in the area. So you also have school children. We've studied school children to see how the schools in the neighborhood. We try to look at the effect of recycling activities. Of course, we've done this only at cross-sectional studies. the next biggest thing we are doing now is a long-term, exposure assessment, trying to look at job and work-specific, work-related environmental exposures and the risks of toxic metabolites. I tried to show here, findings of some studies that we have done in the past, and this paper was published in the Science of Total Environment, and we have very high levels of urinary PAHs. And Stuart, now just because of the conversation we had yesterday, I decided to include this slide just to show that, of course, we've done PAHs and other metabolites like PCBs. We've done PCBs that I am aware about, but of course, the bigger study is 5-year study, actually looking at job-specific and work-related exposures among the e-waste workers and also even non-e-waste workers in the area. We've done trace metal analysis, also on the base of cross-sectional studies. We've done copper, zinc, lead, and aluminum, including arsenic. So we've done basically a lot of this in collecting biological samples from, exposed group, the e-waste workers, and then comparing that with a non-exposed population, like what we term as a control group in other areas. The first time we did this, we used a place called North Kwabinyan. There's about 15 kilometers from Agbobloshie, northwest of Agbobloshie. And then with this bigger study that we're doing, we're collecting samples from e-waste workers and comparing those with residents in Madina Zongo, which is about 10 kilometers from northeast of Agbobloshie. As part of this, still part of the studies that, so if you look at the heavy metals and other, we have mercury, and then you can see that the exposed mean concentration is even less than, what we call the control population. That means that, for this study really showed that it means that e-waste is not the only source of contamination in the city. It means that if you did this, and you can look at blood cadmium level. So if you look at mercury, this was mercury in hair. We took hair samples and we did that. So it means that for ambient, in terms of ambient perspective, we have other important pollutant sources than e-waste activities. If you look at blood lead, much higher amongst the e-waste workers than the controls, and cadmium in urine, same. Nickel in urine, same. Still on major findings, I just want to run through those of you who, metric, like you like numbers, so I just quickly have to run this. So we have data on toxic organic compound, we have the diazines and PCB. So overall, when we did this, we noticed about 17 congeners. We found that 10 of them showed evidence of differences in concentration between exposed and non-exposed group, and then summing the congeners, only one showed evidence of any difference across the two groups. Overall, we noticed that the numbers, the concentration we found were much higher than the WHO standards. I will not, this slide is too busy, so I won't even bother you to go through this, but it summarizes the same story that the other slides showed. So this is it's a typical self-reported survey that we did after this, and this was published in, I think, I don't have my, but I think it's a journal of occupational listening, and then we did self-reported this in people using querying. Oh, I think it still was a second paper from the earlier study. So we noticed that querying activities also contributed a lot to some of the heavy metals that were found on the hairs of the controls. So the big question is, what are the big issues about e-waste as we speak? It's the nature of the e-waste and also the global action. So if you look at it, we go to global action, policy failures. Overall, we know that the Basel Convention says that there should not be transboundary movement of electronic hazardous materials. So then again, because this convention typically says hazardous material, then the definition of e-waste is problematic. If you have a computer, would you say it is hazardous? I am hanging my laptop and I have my phone and I have this small little speaker hanging on me. I don't consider it hazardous, otherwise I don't put it on myself. So the definition of e-waste is a problem of itself. So global action, because they define this convention as so strictly technical terms, it doesn't work for everyday action that will reduce either movement of the electronic waste or even, better still, reduce exposures that the e-waste actually has on the environment and human health. So so if it was typically classified as, hazardous waste and it said not in my backyard, truck loads, or we see even ship loads of electronic products that are almost heading for landfills, yet they are completely defined from their places of origin as usable, and people who are actually taking them are not from the countries of the origin of the e-waste. For example, we have Ghanaians living in the United States. They go out here. In fact, my second iPhone was a second-hand iPhone. I bought it from a friend who visited from Canada. And at the time, I had my first iPhone that I bought new in the United States here. It did not last for 2 years. So I bought it in 2013. In 2015, it was broken. And I got this, and it's still working, 2015 until 2018. So a second-hand phone has lasted for 3 years. So you can see the dilemma that we face as a group of people. So international conventions, when the national governments actually are happy to jump on, like how I stand here and I'm talking and I'm happy that the world, within a global community, this is what politicians do. They are happy to jump on all the treaties that is in, but getting back home, first of all, there's a liturgy in like ratifying the treaties. I know some of the conventions, and I've been following some of the conventions, and I know that they were actually they signed them in like 10 years ago, and they are still not ratified. Ratification means that you have to configure these treaties to become locally or nationally relevant, and you are able to apply them. You render them applicable. But as they stand now, these treaties are not locally applicable because you cannot control anybody holding a used electronic product and define the person as doing any illegal thing. So first of all, the treaties don't work. Even if they work because of the context, they are not applicable in the destination country. So this needs everybody's attention for us to, think about how do we get our local, national politicians to understand that they need to do more than just signing onto treaties. The next level is global action, also intervention. So in Agbobloshie area, we have certain multinational NGOs. Also now, we have funding from U.S. government, National Institute of Health. We have funding from Canada's IDRC. And so there's global action. And in fact, in cooperation with local level actions, we are setting up interventions. And if you look at this the slide here, you can see this is stripping area, and Blacksmith Institute has set up certain machines which will rather strip the cables rather than go to burn. But this comes with problems. The e-waste workers have soon found out that stripping takes a longer time to do. It takes, the machines initially were manually operated. They were mechanical, so you have to turn a thimble and then it will strip. And so they don't find this as a good incentive to do, because first, it takes a long time. Of course, the product is cleaner, and also the process itself is cleaner. But despite that, the disincentives are that it takes a long time, and then they need short time to be able to recover the recoverable material that they want. There's still local action. So, and what is even worse is the local authority, the municipal authority. We witness cases where when there's a little disaster. In 2015 in Ghana, there was heavy flooding and a major disaster. There was explosion, a gas explosion, gas station. And so the following day, what we had was a gathering of local authorities, municipal authorities at Agbobloshie area with bulldozers pulling down and tearing down the residential listen for the e-waste workers, just because they are easy victims. And Kirsten, you spoke about inclusivity and diversity and equity. So environmental justice is a big issue. We need to look at this, and this me here and some of the e-waste leaders of the e-waste work are looking at inspecting the tear down, pull down areas that the demolition took place. Now, research and innovation, as scientists, we really don't have much to do, but we still think that what we have to offer is that in all this, with all this going on e-waste, we still can't stop e-waste bad recycling processes. It's my time up. Okay, we still can solve bad, but in all this, so we still need way forward would be to still need research to look at the combination of exposure. I say this because most people, and even some of the funders, you tell them, they tell you that, but what is still unknown about some of these metabolites that we study. But I say the problem is that if we have zinc coexisting with arsenic and this, because usually what we have is exposure to a complex mixture of chemicals. We still need research to be able to analyze and disaggregate and fine tunes of combination of action of the complex mixture of these chemicals. So research is still important here, and that's why you see us here. Of course, there are school children here that needs to be studying. I'm almost running to the end, and I want this slide actually shows you the mentors in this project that NIH and IDRC funded research. So it shows you the mentors and collaborators. Unfortunately, the PhD student is not represented. So you see Professor Tom Robbins to the top, Professor Neil Basu, you have Michelle Hickok. Michelle Hickok is government partner in the project. We have Marie. Marie is in the University of Michigan here. We have Professor Stuart Batman. You have Professor Benjamin Fayomi from University of Abomey-Calavi in Benin. And then you see our logo here, Joe Health logo. We designed this because we thought that we should have a logo that represents the group, and then NIH logo, of course. That's me here, the bottom, the last bottom is it. And then on this note, okay, we have pictures. You can see right up there, right here, you see the Joe Health team, our international partners from North America and the students. You can see Laurentia does you there with Emmanuel at the one of the fixed sites, collecting data. And you can see the burning process up there, and the picture up there is also collection of respiratory health outcomes, like use of spirometry. And the next slide is to say thank you for your attention.
Wonderful, thank you so much. So we have 5 minutes for questions for Dr. Fobil. Please, Emmanuel.
Okay, so I want to follow up on the very, I think the second presentation that talked about inclusiveness. And I'm going to ask the very first question. Do we have any policymaker here?
So just to repeat the question. Just to repeat the question, Emmanuel here has asked, do we have any policymakers in the room? And in fact, I don't know that we do. Could I get you to raise your hand if you consider yourself a policymaker? Okay, so the answer is yes.
I will also raise, because every day my life is rounded about policy.
Which is fine, but I think that I'm going to touch on something that, those of us in academia, I think that we fail to do. We will do the work and get them published, but most of these policymakers are not interested in reading articles. Even friends who have been changed to become politicians are not interested in reading, some of those things. So the thing is, how well do we engage stakeholders? That really is an issue, because then, for example, when they went to Agbobloshie to dismantle whatever was there, they never bothered to include people who have done studies there. And in the same way, people who are also doing studies after every whatever findings, we are also not, more like getting these people to get to know what the issues are. So I guess that's an area we need to be looking at, getting stakeholders involved, and that will require that we do proper stakeholder analysis, get to know who really are the people who call the shots. I think that if we are able to do that, then we can be making some impact.
Let me just respond very quickly. Emmanuel, I totally agree with your comments. And I think as a faculty member here at the University of Michigan, it's tough for me to acknowledge, but I absolutely must acknowledge that the papers I write are not what's going to make a difference. It's getting a group, I'll read them, maybe my mom reads them. Thanks, Mom. But for the most part, it's going to be us translating this into actionable items. And so I think you're absolutely right. Shabi, do you have a question or follow-up? Okay, we get a microphone.
Certainly agree, and I think it's important for policymakers and stakeholders to listen to us, but I also think one of the things that's wonderful about this initiative is that it's designed to be interdisciplinary, and I think we need to also take more seriously, and this is something I think that we'll talk about more this afternoon, the social and political dynamics that shape our work and that should actually shape the way we talk about possible interventions, both technological and policy. So there's realpolitik here, right? And those the sort of political realities and social realities need to be part of our academic discussions. And I think we don't talk about that enough. We in the academy tend to go towards the ideal and then expect policymakers to go for that ideal solution. And I don't think that, I think that we have to learn as well as teaching.
I totally agree. Thank you, Shabita. And I do want to highlight, so the way our day is unfolding, we're getting sort of a country-specific viewpoint right now, but in the afternoon, we're really going to start to delve into these issues of, what issues might be common across countries, what are unique to countries, and most importantly, what are options we have to address any impacts we identify. Great. Any other questions for Dr. Fobil? So I have one, and I'll give you the microphone in a sec. So my question would be, could you describe for us what, if anything, the Ghanaian government has done in terms of trying to comply with the Basel Convention?
So I know that this convention has been, I think, 2011, so almost like 8 years. What the government has done now, at least we know that starting last year or two, they have ratified this. There's now a draft, I think, a legislation. But I tell you, I've read this, and it has no local applicability. For example, you can't take anyone to court on matters of e-waste. There's really no way. And if there's a legislation that does not, recognize taking someone to court, what is the incentive or disincentive for asking people not to do it or do it? So it still doesn't work.
Great. Thank you so much. Gosh, the idea of not being able to take someone to court, that strikes fear into my American heart. I don't anyway, we are out of time. Thank you so much for your great talk.